Hello. Hi. Hello. A very good evening to the panelists. And I think in some part of the world, as we have our very own panelists at international level also. So bearing upon good morning and good evening. Good evening from India and good morning from the other parts of the world to all of you. Today, on this particular day, I welcome you all for a panel discussion on the topic that is implications of AI into law. Now, understanding what exactly AI is, how are we going to understand what it is in law, how it is going to affect law, or all the other different dimensions, is that is what we are going to have our discussion mostly based on. Giving a very, very brief outlook about uh, giving a very, very brief concept about what law is and what artificial intelligence is all about. Let's just understand it in a very small way. There was a movie in India some time back that was released where we had this robot called Chitty. It was Rajinikanth movie where we could see that Chitty was probably doing all kinds of activities. Till the time he had good knowledge or was given an EQ level by a good person, Chitty reacted in one particular way. But when the villain in the movie, he did some kind of manipulation in Chitty's software, Chitty started working in a very different way. So just to put, because majority of our participants are students, so just to make them understand in a very simple language, it is AI is something what Chitty was doing. AI is something which is an abstract or a kind of an EQ that would be given to machines where machines would be thinking on itself. Now, giving it a literal definition, years back, years back, artificial intelligence was defined by John McCarthy as the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. AI could also be defined as cognitive technologies. However labeled, the field has many branches with many significant connections and commonalities among them. The most important fields are currently machine learning, including deep learning and predictive analytics, natural language processing, comprising of translation, classification and clustering, and information extraction. As we can see, artificial intelligence is generally graphed into two types, that is strong artificial intelligence and weak artificial intelligence. So as far as strong is concerned, we are still devising ourselves on that. But the weak artificial intelligence or narrow artificial intelligence is something that is available and we are using it in our daily parlance in means of Siri or Alexa, as we have in India, as we have at all other parts of the world also. So from here on, I would request rest of our panelists to give their views on topics. There have been a certain set of questions that have been addressed by the participants also, and a certain set of questions was already given to the panelists. So starting with the main question at first, I would like to address to our panelists is, how do you think that AI will affect the practice of law and in which areas? So anybody, please. Alex, yeah.
Want me to go first? Okay. So my name is Alex Hamilton. I'm the CEO of Radiant Law, which is a UK law firm, New Law as it's called, law firm specializing in commercial contracts. We're fixed price only. We use a lot of technology. We build our own technology, and we're kind of seen as kind of the trendy end of law, if you will, in the UK. I'm actually based in Cape Town, where most of the team is. So I come to this topic as a skeptic, right? I think that there are many, many areas outside the traditional practice of law, many tools, many forms of technology, and this is just another one. And that it can only do a few limited things in the context of law. Now, I say this as a contracts lawyer. I know that e-discovery and litigation has had actually the biggest success. But as a contracts lawyer, we have to recognize that all AI and machine learning so far can do is fundamentally classify things. It can tell you this clause is this type or it's that type, but it can't reason about the clause. It doesn't understand the clause. And there's no pathway from where we are right now to reasoning and understanding clauses. Now, if you find a termination for force majeure clause in your contract, then you probably can reason that there's a termination for force majeure of at least one party in there. But it doesn't really get that much more sophisticated than that. And I think there's more generally a problem in this area where we are very bad at reasoning about these kind of things because we naturally work by analogy. And so we go, oh my goodness, this is amazing that it can do this. Therefore, you know, if a kid could do that, it could also do that. Therefore, AI can do that, but it can't do that, right? And so I think we have a overly dramatic, and it's interesting some of the questions that were asked in advance that showed, frankly, a lot of fear about this topic, an overly dramatic approach to it, where it's helpful in some areas, but you know, it's not that big a deal. And I don't think we've got a pathway to knowing how it becomes a big deal. You talked about general AI at the beginning, and we're nowhere close to general AI. We have no pathway to get to general AI, right? We're not going to get there, like Hinton says, you know, just more deep learning, right? Go read Gary Marcus if you want a more sane view of where we actually are and where the problems are. So my other concern with this topic is I used to be a partner at one of the world's biggest now US law firms, and I walked out because you couldn't get anything done because the incentives were all wrong, and set up Radiant Law to try to fix what I think is the bigger problem, which is I think law is broken, right? I think it costs too much. It's too inaccessible to too many people. It's slow, it's antiquated, and it thinks it's doing well, which is tragic, right? So in the context of, and that's before we even get to the access to justice problem, which is a complete disaster around the world. So in the context of that, right, we're actually looking as the legal profession for ways to avoid the hard topics of change. Right. And I see that AI is actually the enemy in this conversation because I think it's a fig leaf that distracts everyone from actually doing the stuff we could do right now, even using a quill to make law more accessible, like, you know, writing a contract that people could actually understand, for example, you know, shock horror. So I worry about this as a topic because I think, you know, people go, oh my goodness, I have no jobs. Well, you're going to still have jobs, right? And I worry about it because it means that, you know, as a partner once said to me at a conference, right? Partner once said to me, oh, yeah, we're doing this innovation thing. We've got a Kira license somewhere. Kira is like, you know, piece of software that pulls clauses out, right? So I don't have to do anything. I can carry on charging my clients by the hour. I'm done. We're done with innovation, right? That's my opening statement.
Okay.
Maybe I can jump in about this if I may. Sorry, I didn't want to.
Yeah. I just wanted to say I want to extend my apologies to Alex. I was supposed to introduce him, and I just completely jumped to the topic. I'm so sorry. Now, I think probably
that's all right.
Yeah. Can we have Sir Sebastian here? Like introducing him to the rest of our participants. Sebastian, sir, is a practicing lawyer based in Canada. He has his practice mainly in the areas of Toronto and Quebec. He's a Crown Counsel for the Public Prosecution Service of Canada. He has been Professor of Law at University of Ottawa. He's a person of distinguished caliber. He holds a degree in law from University of Quebec. His masters in law are from Level University and in international law from Hague Academy of International Law, Netherlands. He is I would say, a polyglot, having authored books and articles in English, French, and Vietnamese. He has studied Russian and Slavic studies from McGill University. He has recently acquainted himself with knowledge of Indonesian and Mandarin Chinese extensively. He's a member of Law Society of Ontario and Law Society of Quebec. So we would give it up so we could now hear your opinions upon the topic. And I again extend my apologies to Alex. I'm really sorry.
No worries. I'm fluent actually in Russian, but it's fine. Thank you very much for this introduction. But
Alex, you know what? I would just want to ask one. Sebastian,
please,
I would
please.
Want to ask one question. Like right now, we were discussing about AI, and we were talking about the fact that you have knowledge of a lot of languages. You think, can AI just work the way you have the knowledge of so many languages? Can AI take over this part? Can AI be manufactured in a way that it is working towards knowing so many languages, and it can give an action and interpretation in so many languages?
Yeah, I will answer the question, but out of courtesy and of course, because I appreciated Mr. Hamilton's answer, if you want to introduce him more in a more lengthy fashion, please do before I answer the question. I wouldn't mind. And actually, I'm sure Mr. Hamilton would be pleased by you doing that. So feel free to do that first, and then I can answer the question.
No, sir, that's okay.
No,
Please,
it's
go on.
okay. To answer the question about languages and so on, so there are always, like, for example, the answer would be, well, yes or no, but I do think that Mr. Hamilton really nailed something that is way more important than, okay, the language issue and the translation. So because basically translating a document, it's just or whatever it is, it's translation, it's one thing. But what Mr. Hamilton pointed out, which is very important, and I totally agree with him on this, is basically one word, is reason. Does AI have reason? Basically, does AI think? Do the machines think? The answer is no. There's no singularity for now. Human beings, I totally agree again with Mr. Hamilton about this. There's no way people will start losing their job. Jobs will change, but humans are still necessary. And more specifically in the field of law, well, languages and so on. Well, language is it's a mode of expression to basically. I'm thinking about a Supreme Court of Canada decision now that addressed language rights, basically, and also defined what languages serves to. It's a mode of communication. So it's only a means. Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Somebody turned my sound off. So do you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please go on.
Okay. So hopefully it didn't cut off my answer too long.
No.
Okay, excellent. So basically, languages are a mode of communication. It's nothing else. There are beauties to languages. They're meaningful. But again, reason and why. And the connection with the languages is this. One word, and in law it's very important, can have different meanings, can imply things, can require the people to think about the extent, the scope. The same word in the UK law and Indian law or Canadian law may mean absolutely totally different things. Not exact. An apple is an apple. Fair enough. But in India, you have kinds of apples that are totally different than Canadian ones. So if we say in a decision about agriculture, I'm not specialized in that field, totally respectful about the field, but let's say a decision about civil case in court about apples. What kind of apples are we talking about? Can a computer make a research? Can AI focus on, oh yeah, apples. So basically what is meant is the type of apples in Canada. So what is, because that's a Canadian case, or the ones that are in India, because this is an Indian case. Oh, this is in this area of India. So that means, so no, they're basically the initiative, the reason. This is the key word actually of, well, there are way more things that Mr. Hamilton said that are highly relevant, but AI is not at the stage, and thankfully so. There's no threat to the human race. There's no threat to jobs directly. There may be, because like I said, jobs will change, but does it entirely change? Basically, are we going to be replaced by artificial intelligence? Well, not now. And when, for example, when we go to grocery stores in Canada and different countries, sometimes cashiers are replaced by, like the very simple example, they're replaced by automatic machines where you can scan your items and so on. But people complained. They want to see, when they're buy items, they want to see people. Like it's not in the human nature to simply adapt easily to machines, because we have this very, very important thing that is called, like, we have the herd instinct.
Somebody switched on.
Okay, I just reactivated my sound, so I'm back on. Okay, so you hear me still? Okay, excellent. So just that was my last point anyway. I don't want to speak too much, but this is what I would finish on is when you go to the grocery store buying items, do you want to talk to a machine or a human being? Well, people complain. So at in many grocery stores, you have both. You still have human beings, but the number of cashiers diminished. So practically speaking, this is an impact of very basic AI. So, and in the field of law, also we are not even in criminal law. There, of course, I'm a prosecutor. Maybe I would like to add very briefly this little example, if I may. But about the predictions, or in terms of sentencing, when courts are to impose a sentence on an accused, there's the prediction tools. But the prediction tools, they don't take many factors into account. And as the Supreme Court of Canada says, and I'm Canadian, so I have to rely on this court, is sentences are to be individualized. How a machine can individualize to the farthest extent possible, there's always a problem. There's always one factor that will be missed or skipped by a machine, which will make this sentence not necessarily fit to an individual who committed a crime. So in the field of criminal law, there are issues, not necessarily problems. It works to a certain extent, but it is a tool. That's something else that Mr. Hamilton said. It is a tool. So it is not the replacement of the human race. It is a tool, and the tool is not refined to the, like in contract laws, Mr. Hamilton mentioned. I totally agree with that. The development of artificial intelligence in various fields varies, but even though in criminal law, prediction tools have been somehow and somewhat in the United States, for example, in several states, they have been somewhat successful, between quotes, because it's not that successful. It's still a tool. So you will not see soon judges judging your case in Delhi or Mumbai, or you appear before a machine who is or which is, because these are not persons, but in my opinion, yet. Except maybe in Saudi Arabia and Japan, where there are examples about this. But anyway, that's a different topic. But this is what I had to say about this. Fascinated by Mr. Hamilton's answer, so I had to add up to it too. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Sir, I must say this is certainly a very, very nice view about taking about AI, and especially the very fact that a machine cannot reason is something that law, any sentence, any kind of an order, any dictum is absent in law without the very specific word reason. And the moment we say the word reason, the whole idea about artificial intelligence itself holds a very big question. Now I'd like to address Mr. Vivek Narayan Sharma. He's an ex-panelist with us. He's a socio-political constitution expert and renowned advocate practicing in Supreme Court of India. He's a joint secretary of Supreme Court Advocates on Record Association. He enrolled as an advocate with Bar Council of Delhi in the year 1999. He's senior counsel on the panel of Union of India and State of Uttar Pradesh. He is a popular and most read columnist with Times of India and Economic Times, and an author of one of very interesting book, which is Electionomics. Electionomics. Yes.
The science of elections in India.
Science of elections. Okay, so electionomics. So, sir, please, we maybe have your opinions on the topic.
Yeah, great to hear. Hi, Alex, once again, and hi, Sebastian. Good wishes to all the people who are on the platform today. So we are talking about AI, of course, means I perceive that as if Alex and Sebastian are taking it as adversary. In a typical context, AI can never be an adversary in the common parlance, as you say, the wisdom. It will not have that ability to convert the reason, means that achieve that wisdom. which is part of the occupation that legal field has, and all different field may have. See, essentially, it's an internal engine which converts the data, processes the data into the information. Then, in turn, that information is processed into the knowledge, and then this knowledge has to be converted into the wisdom. So, to what extent that can be converted into wisdom, that to that extent, AI can be effective for the use in legal parlance. And I'm confining myself to legal parlance only for this matter. So that's the behavior and cognition, which is the user interface, which can be means defined for the AI use. Well, globally, the data, if I had to search,
Uh,
so
Sir,
already,
just a second, please. I would request all the participants to please.
Kajuri, you're not
Oh,
audible now.
sorry.
Okay.
I was going to say, other than the panelists, I request all other participants to please mute yourself. Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, means I used two terms used by Alex and Sebastian. I please don't mind. I'm not using Mr. with the name, so I hope you're comfortable with me that way. So number one is hard. This is hard areas and soft areas, which is used by Alex. Hard area, more particularly, and then tool of facilitation, not replacement. So these are very good terms. AI can be utilized in soft areas pertaining to the litigation to really see how effectively we can manage the litigation and the corporate practice in law and various other legal aspects where it means it cannot go into those hardcore areas where the research is required to be done, where the drafting is required to be done. So you cannot replace the human brain with AI in those contexts because there is always a requirement of a human mind, and that human mind requirement can only be fulfilled by a human mind only. It can't be replaced with machine mind because it will be deficient in understanding and processing that particular reason and wisdom of that human mind. So howsoever we expand our horizons on AI technologies, we will never be able to achieve, to my understanding. Well, let's see, there are gross number of possibilities in future. So that's one part. Today, AI is getting used in various other areas. Contract analytics is one of the areas. In some countries, it is getting used for the drafting of contracts also. That there is a set format. You feed in the details, and then it will bring out your contract. But ultimately, as Mr. Sebastian said, it cannot replace, and I do agree with Alex and Sebastian on this, it can't replace the work of a lawyer. How it can be helpful in Indian context, I will tell you. See, there is tons of pendency in Indian courts. Today, the global legal market is of around $1 trillion. Indian market is only 0.11% of that $1 trillion global market. With the onset of COVID, the global perspective has shifted from China as a manufacturing hub to different countries as manufacturing hubs, where India is also in consideration by the global markets that Indian manufacturers can send their goods in the global market. So in such a scenario, when the Indian global legal market is only say the 0.11% of the global legal market, so there is a chance that Indian legal market can increase its share and percentage in coming year on various factors. Number one is increase in the manufacturing activities which are going to take place here, but to goal of self-reliance which has been propagated by the government of India. Then third is global environment against China. So if there is a drop in demand, so commensurating with that drop, India can gain and various other countries can gain. So we have to see that how can this position be advantageous. Then third is maturing Indian legal market, and then Arbitration Amendments Act 2015 and 19, which has brought arbitration to on a global context, and then taxation policies. So with all this, as soon as the manufacturing activities will increase in Indian market, so the legal dispute will also increase. So therefore, there is a possibility that the horizon of Indian legal market can expand itself to 10 times or maybe 100 times in the coming 10 years time. So why I am talking about this, there is a very important reason, because there is a lot of backlog in Indian litigation, and there are around 5 crore matters pending in various courts at different levels in Indian courts. So in such a scenario, AI can be used to effectively work and monitor and red flag where the number of cases are taking too much of time. They can work effectively to monitor data system and date system by categorizing cases in defined parameters to chalk out plan to deciding them. And then which are cases which are taking a lot of time and they are seeking adjournments. So there are various effective measurements which can be created under AI system. And this has huge potential in India. So with this means there would be more discussions on the topic. So I'll go back to Ms. Kajori.
Yeah. With this, I would, sir, I must say this is one of the biggest insights that we do have of our Indian courts, the highest number of pendencies that have happened. And I think after the COVID scenario, this pendency is going to increase even more. With the court shutting down for the maximum time, almost the whole of the year, and majority of hearings happening online, I think the pendency will go up. So, of course, I think at that point of time, as far as addressing the pendency issue is concerned, AI can definitely play a very, very encouraging role. With that, I would like to call on our last panelist, that is Abhivardhan. Abhivardhan, I can't see him. He's there?
Yeah.
Where are you? I can't see you. Abhivardhan?
I think I'm visible. Yeah.
Yeah, Abhivardhan here. Now,
Yeah.
Abhivardhan, I would call him, he's a young dynamo in a way that he is a CEO of CEO of dealing with AI and international law and related to AI and law in India. And I would like to have Abhivardhan, your views on the topic now that you've heard the other panelists.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I think I'm audible still. Yeah. So in general, when we see the rise of AI in India, in the legal and other sectors, one thing we need to understand that there's a very big role of something known as idea models. So idea models always drive us towards solutions and affirming something out of. We have seen that after liberalization of the Indian economy and the Uruguay rounds, the whole global economy, I'm taking the Indian context side by side, the whole global economy has started to liberalize its machineries, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is services. Countries like China, India have also started. We can say that there are different comparisons. China is doing very well in that, and India is still not, but it's still emerging in some sense. I think in this year, despite the pandemic, India is still trying to create a sense of real resilience. So how does AI play into that picture? One thing is for sure that when we see the operative understanding of AI ethics in India, the sector seems to be growing because definitely when it comes to smart contracts, when it comes to fintech, when it comes to algorithmic pricing, the role of AI will be very important because these are more tangible sectors or tangible areas where we can see India's avenues growing. I think it will happen in general with other non-legal fields which are attributable to AI. I think it's already happening with, if you go to South India, you'll find much development in states like Maharashtra, Karnataka, and so forth. But one thing which is very interesting in this course is the diplomatic part. Like we have recently joined the alliance, which is global partnership on AI, with some developed countries like the United States, France, Japan, all the Pax Americana bloc members, Quad members, NATO members. And one thing is for sure that whenever we take inspiration for our approach towards information technology, we always take our consideration towards two countries in terms of policy making, which is very important for the sector of AI, even in law. First is the United States and second is European Union. But my observation would be, I may be wrong, I may be right, anybody can disagree with me on that, that more or less India is inspiring more on information technology resilience, privacy considerations from Europe and not America. That is also because European Union / Council of Europe are very, very capable in terms of having a rule of law mechanism and accountability mechanism, which is not possible right now so faster in the United States. It's in the United States, it's more of a down to top approach where various states are trying their own machineries. California came up with an accountability act. So in that scenario, yes, it is very well developing. So I would say in a way that idea models is a very important factor when we decide our policies over AI. It will affect arbitration. Yes. It will affect fintech. I think it has started, so it will do. Will it affect healthcare? Considering the fact that a vaccine is underway, some vaccines which have been proposed by other countries and also by India, they're also in the process. So the role of disruptive technology will be connected with it. Yes. But we will see how that goes. Agriculture is a very important sector which this Indian government very well considers. I think even the Niti Aayog in their recent policy paper did. So will it help us in a gradual way? Yes, but the speed will be less. So more or less what I can say here is that we must consider how this sector is growing. At the same time, we should always understand what are the policy understandings as to what India wishes to do, how its people will populate things and then expand. I think in terms of innovation, we are always called frugal innovators. So even in AI, we can actually do frugal innovation. I think startups are capable to do that, entrepreneurs are capable to do that. But to say whether the innovation perspective in India is frugal is not true, because now what we are doing is that we are focusing on a South-South cooperation, which is that now we are engaging more with African nations, Middle Eastern countries like UAE, Israel, and so forth. So cooperation-wise also, we have kept our alignments very clear. While that is not the case with the Chinese and the Americans, that's not the case with Europe. But in Indian case, it's very transformative. Another inspiration is ASEAN, where we see that when it comes to Singapore, Japan, South Korea, with these countries also, we are engaging towards democratizing AI, which is nice. We actually give platforms to multi-idea considerations towards AI, which simply means in this way. So for example, whenever we say that, okay, AI is more about cognition, reason, and logic. Is it just about that? Well, actually, if we see the development of AI ethics, what happens is that it started in Europe, thanks to Alan Turing. Historically, much arguments can be made, India, China, and so forth, but I'm not getting into that philosophy. But let's say after 1950, after Alan Turing, who came, we had the Americans. The Americans really did well in that. But so computer science had a very intensive role. After computer science, the second field, which was very much attributable here, is management studies. And management studies is a very important thing. In Europe, it is different. In America, it's different. Then it actually changed with time. In India, what happens is that we amalgamated management science ideas over AI ethics from America and Europe very well. With regards to us, we are still maturing into that. But I think since we are very open to multi-idea models, I think innovation is very much reasonable. And I think the issue of regulation can also be dealt. Regardless of the fact that we do not have any laws, we don't need much. All we need is one step-by-step down to top regulation so that we come up with better precedents and better approaches. So that would be my take over the legal sector and as far as India's cooperation perspective is there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I would request the rest of the panelists, Alex, Sebastian, sir, Vivek, sir, anything that you would want to contribute to anybody's take, please? We have a couple of questions.
Yeah, maybe. Hello, Sebastian here, or Seb. You can call me Seb. It's fine. One thing I would like to add to what the two last panelists said. I'll be very brief, but what Vivek sir said is something else, and he used another word that is very important that basically distinguishes AI, for now at least, AI and human beings. The term, very important term, wisdom. So in addition to reason, because reason can be simplified, and one could argue and say, well, no, AI can think somehow because they can make logical connections between A and B, and sometimes factor in C, D, E, etc. But and then we could argue that they think okay, even if we take this for granted and we accept that assumption, there is no wisdom. If you take the example of Sophia, the famous bot, who basically is the one of the most advanced replica of human beings, does she think by herself? No, it's all based on data that are input, and it's even the emotions. Are they? And I wrote about this part, but are they heartfelt emotions? Are they sincere emotions? Even though they could be described as emotions in their great scheme of things, they may not be perceived as emotions by the receiver of the expressed emotion. So an emotion is not only one person expressing it, it's also about the person seeing, understanding the emotion that is received in the great scheme of things where communication happens. So is there any wisdom expressed in there in the emotion of being angry or happy from a machine? The answer is no. So I would say this, and about what the last speaker, Abhi Vardan, said, it's something very important as well about regulations. The EU is very advanced about this. They issued a few, actually
without even
their
going to the merits. So I think, in my view, that's the biggest learning of this judgment, that make sure you're
if I yeah, so somebody was okay interrupting. So the European Union is very important about this, especially about ethics. They're among other things, they are very critical. They're very on the edge about this, and that's it's always a balancing exercise between, okay, how can we rely on AI and et cetera, et cetera. So I really appreciate what the last speaker said about the reliance of India on the European Union, of course. But I am reassured personally. I'm sure many of us and of you will be also to know that the EU also considers very seriously ethical considerations, ethical regulation as well, in order to not let us be invaded by artificial intelligence, invaded or replaced eventually somehow. So that's what I had I wanted to add to the last two speakers. Thank you.
Okay, now there are a couple of questions more. Again, we come to the next one, which says that social media sites like Facebook and Instagram use users' data to take advantage. How can AI and legal industry work together in protecting this? Other ways or other way around, they are talking about how can AI be a source to end the cybercrime? You think AI can work as a tool in ending cybercrime and in giving or contributing anywhere as a tool for data protection, or it is going to misuse the idea of privacy of an individual?
Well, I feel compelled to answer. Of course, I'm happy to be interrupted by any other speakers, but as the prosecutor here, I guess the question is best suited to me. Well, there are two questions in one question here. I like the question very much, and for the following reason, I did study the social scoring system, social credit system. I'm sorry, of China, that basically uses several artificial intelligence tools, and in many ways, it is pervasive and invasive in privacy and into personal lives, and it's worse than that, in my opinion. It basically makes people somehow addicted, between quotes, to some tools and some level of rating. So basically, the social credit system is it's not one thing; it's several things, several tools. So people oftentimes misunderstand what the social credit system is, but it's basically a way to rate your appreciation or dislike of this and at that. It is also used by the judicial system in China. But the point is, very briefly, and to answer the other question, in criminal law directly. So the point about the SCS or social credit system is, yes, it is invasive. Yes, it is pervasive. Hence the importance of ethics, hence the importance of saying, hey, this is enough, that goes too far, this is invasive into my privacy. And in India, you have this famous, very famous decision rendered recent, well, somehow recent decision, not so recent, but still less than 10 years ago, this decision of the Supreme Court of India in Puttaswamy, which basically establishes the right to privacy as a fundamental right. So, and that also exists in several countries. The United Kingdom, of course, and Mr. Hamilton can speak to that if he wishes to. It also exists in Canada as a fundamental right. So we're not talking about a simple right. No, we are talking about a fundamental right of human beings, of citizens of a country. So that would be my answer for this. Very briefly, for the use in criminal law, I already partially replied to this. So I will just maybe add a bit more, because I don't want to take over this presentation. I just talk too much, as always. I'm a Frenchman, so I guess I'm very wordy. So about the use of AI, artificial intelligence in criminal law, well, it is a tool. Again, it is used, but it cannot be relied upon with 100% certainty as, oh yeah, the prediction tool. We are not in the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where basically we will predict crimes in advance and we will punish people in advance before they even committed their crimes, because we planned the crimes that they were going to commit. No, and that should never be like that, because people can change, and there's never a certainty about the future. There's never a certainty about the next present. What we know about what will happen in 10 minutes from now, we have no idea. We always have the wisdom, wisdom to change our mind, change our future. So, and this temporal, or this space-time perception, the AI has no idea about this. So, and in terms of criminal law, it does play a role in rehabilitation. How AI will consider the fact that a criminal will change, will rehabilitate, change his or her behavior, become a better person. So basically, this prediction tool could simply cancel this possibility. Oh, let's punish this person. No rehabilitation at all, because this person committed XYZ crimes. And this is the only objective facts that can be considered. But all the subjective facts are ignored. So that's what I would say. But of course, I would like to say more. But again, I would like to hear from my very distinguished colleagues and speakers this morning. So I will let them answer other questions, or this one if they wish to answer it too, of course.
Yes. So,
See,
Vivek, sir,
Kajuri,
Alex?
if I have to answer to this question, you see, the legal framework is still incomplete pertaining to these two areas. If you will see, means there had been a lot of violation. There had been several lawsuits in UK, was filed by some US citizens during the election period and post-election period. And there had been several web series also coming on there. So if you look at it, means the policy regime is incomplete in these areas, and in India too. And recently, if you would have heard that Facebook India chief was called by the parliamentary panel in India, and then various other stakes are being worked out on. Even with regard to the broadcasting, the legal provisions with regard to the broadcasting guidelines are not complete. Media does not want to create restraints on themselves. They are always opposing it. Similarly, those organizations which are behind the data mining, they are also means in the backdrop, they are controlling the outcome, that there is no policy regime comes in which by which they can be affected. So of course, this area has to be cured. Then it's just like a product liability. So this area also calls for damage, and very high scale damage. So if your product has failed, or you have failed in your providing proper services, then you could be liable. So that kind of thing has to come. So till the time this legal regime comes into place, we can't think of AI coming into place at all, because AI would come only later to facilitate an outcome by virtue of applying the legal provisions we already have. So AI cannot replace the legal provision and cannot become a legal provision itself. So that's my answer to this question.
Okay. So I would like to add to this, as the very fact that I have taught both these subjects, media law and IT law, like I deal with both of them. And I can just say that at present, as far as India is concerned, it is in a very different, I would say it's in a confused state of affairs. It's like most of the broadcasting happens not only limited, it's not limited to just TV sector and anything. We are going so heavy on internet, and we are going so high, so heavy on all our Amazon, Netflix, and things like that. But the only regulation that we have as far as all these objects are concerned is IT laws. And our IT laws are way far behind.
And incomplete IT law.
Completely incomplete. They're incomplete and they're way far behind as far as our technology is concerned. We're talking about AI here, but as far as our intermediary liabilities are concerned, we basically have nothing.
Liability at all.
There is no such liability at all.
The servers are not situated here. The data is traveling in different countries, and we don't know how this data is getting processed in mind and how it is getting used.
Definitely.
There had been credit card frauds. Somebody had used a credit card in China in the last 2 years. There had been so many cyber crimes which have been committed. But we are deficient somewhere on this. This is a global scenario which has to be resolved by way of a global initiative. So, of course, means we, being lawyers, individual lawyers, we cannot really comment on these aspects too much, except sirening an alarm that this requires to be addressed.
Yeah, definitely, sir. Alex, sir, I think he has something to say.
Yeah, so I think it's helpful if we just think for a little bit about what we mean by AI, right? Because, you know, it's such a broad term, and so there's so much bullshit in this area, right? So, you know, the fundamentally the AI we're talking about is I describe as pattern matching, right? So it's kind of machine learning, and we use, rather than the traditional form like the first generation of AI, but it's more expert systems where we created the if-then rules of if X happens, do Y. If-then rules manually, which turned out to be a real pain, and no one really got as far as they did in getting traction on the world by making it computable. We came up with a new technique, which is basically infer the rules through lots of data. And that's done through pattern matching, right? So it's really, really, really good at spotting pictures of cats on the internet, right? So now I'm a big fan of cat pictures on the internet. So I think this is great progress, but that's what we're talking about, right? Now, so we have to go back to the questions. We're talking about, can AI, for example, help with abuse of data? Well, you know, there are two fundamental problems here. One is we can build, so we've created a lot more data, social media and what have, and it's beyond the capacity of humans to operate at that scale, right? In terms of monitoring it, you know, bar the Great Wall of China, right? So we using these tools now to help at scale find patterns of things that we have problems with. The first problem is these tools are fairly crude, so they actually need a lot of human review afterwards. And the second is we don't actually know what good or bad language is, right? I mean, there's fundamental policy questions here that go to the heart of free speech and so on, and privacy and all the rest of it, where we don't have clear-cut rules. So we're kind of asking the social media companies to police this domain without really understanding whether a picture is valid or not, a statement is valid or not valid. And then we're trying, without even having a deep understanding of that, because guess what, humans have been arguing about this for thousands of years, we don't then try to apply a poor man's version of monitoring this, which is what AI does, right? It's very crude and susceptible, and it's a black box that's hard to interpret what it's actually even doing. So I think AI can be helpful in these areas, but I think we have to be careful about its problematic nature. The problems we are dealing with that are much harder than just can we make it work, but what should be the right answer, which, you know, you ask people around the world will come up with different answers. People within a country will come up with different answers. So that's what I have to say.
Okay. Abhivardhan, would you like to add to something?
Yeah, I would be really happy to add. I hope I'm visible now. So
no, you're not visible. You're audible.
Okay. I think it's better now. I think it's now visible.
No, you're audible. You could go on.
Sure. So to add on the aspect of how AI is perceived, well, actually, it's a very big gamble, but a very interesting one to be factual. Because if we see the way we perceive, as very well our my colleagues in this panel rightly pointed out that there are national approaches as well as global approaches, we often see that the intent that okay, we have a global approach towards AI, we have a national approach towards AI, they always clash. That is inevitable. But one important factor that has arisen is not actually related to technology alone. It is also related to the history of the world, in a sense, human history, I would say anthropology, which is about postmodernism. So, postmodernism is very important because it shows up how, although politically things are very subjective, but not exactly like that, in the sense of how we see our institutions. So, for example, earlier, the idea of technology was not much about uh, creating convenience. Earlier, it was more about utility. So determinism came into existence in Europe and America, and then we inherited in India also. Africa also inherited determinism and its theories. Then we inherited various technological developments, and actually we did it. After determinism, what artificial intelligence brought was something known as probability. Probability not in terms of mathematics, probability in terms of how we are seeing things. So the idea of probability actually was very significant. Now what we are seeing is that our mechanical approach of seeing things, which I would say the approach of economics, which was the Newtonian approach of economics or the approach of Adam Smith, is now being replaced by a new concept, which I think Friedrich Hayek and other libertarian economists took very into important consideration, was which we now call as complex adaptive systems. So now what the problems that we face regarding defining AI and seeing AI is that AI itself is not an absolute thing. It can be defined in physical forms, it can be defined in digital forms. Chatbots can also represent AI, but it doesn't mean that they're absolutely within that perfect picture of an AI. No, they are not. So this is a very important factor. I think it happens with quantum computing as well. It happens with other realms as well. So now what we can positively see is that we have to now take challenges. I'm just taking the global south perspective for now, not the global north. If you see in the global north, it's a very monotonous trend, with Europe actually really doing better on rule of law. But in terms of competition, it is China which is actually very well competing with the US. So it's a completely different thing. But in global south, taking, because global south is very important, Latin America, Africa, India, and Indo-Pacific, the Quad area, which is I think ASEAN plus India. That area is very important because here there are more complex adaptive systems. So investing in innovation is nice, but then we will have to see how will the developers and innovators see things into consideration, and that actually will drive a new age. I think we have seen various AI approaches being published by various countries. We have seen Chinese approach, we have seen the Indian approach. In fact, the US government, just before this US election happened, just recently, they published a report in related to AI and defense. And they, I think in page 185 somewhere, they have specifically mentioned of Indo-US cooperation. So there are certain things which are developing. Global North is prepared, but there is a monotony in the Global North region. For Global South, I think it's all more of a diverse challenge. So that will actually drive the way we will see artificial intelligence. We can say any system to be AI under a very trivial sense, in an open sense. But yes, there is no conclusion over that. What is absolutely AI? It's like the same question: what is artificial general intelligence? Answer is no. We can just have theories on it. We can have some observations on it. Some people say it will take 800 years, some people say 50 years, some people say 100. My observation is maybe more than 100. So let us see what happens.
Okay. I would say we did have a very nice take by Abhivardhan. I would like to address one question here also, and one more issue that had come up. What was that artificial intelligence has been used massively as far as the medical field is concerned. So, what and how are we going to treat this kind of a machinery? Are we going to use it as a technology? Are we going to treat AI as an individual? Because if we see that some kind of a negligence happens while an operation was being conducted, say the power went off, or maybe the surgical arm that was being used, there was some malfunction in that. So, in that kind of a situation, how would we determine the liability? Or that is one of the reasons that AI is not going to be that relevant, or that is where AI actually lacks. If anyone, if you could please.
If I may, very briefly here,
Yes,
and of
yes,
course,
yes, sir.
I'm happy if any other speakers disagree with me, but I will answer very briefly. Still, nowadays, except the few examples where Saudi Arabia gave citizenship to one AI, I forgot the name of it, but there's and also in Japan, there's one case that a different type of citizenship was given. So basically granting the status of an individual for these EI machines, but these are exceptional marginal examples. So if there are examples such as you mentioned, in terms of liability, well, it's corporate liability that applies, or civil liability, but it goes, you have to that didn't change anything so far. You have to go beyond the machine itself and connect it to a human being. So in various ways, depending on what kind of damages are caused. Are we talking about civil damages or more in commercial damages, et cetera, et cetera? I'm sure Mr. Hamilton will have something to say about this without putting the spot on Mr. Hamilton, but I'm sure that he has something to say about this. So yeah, that would be my short answer. Like, it's not, there is no, for now, except the few examples I mentioned and a few more, these examples being marginal. It's the state of affairs is that the law as it is applies somehow, and the principles that exist apply, and it's AI or AI machines are not individuals at this point. So there's no change at all in terms of liability or who's going to pay for the damage. So can an AI machine be found liable of a murder case? In one articles I published, I'm talking about the iRobot movie. So a different movie again, but so where a robot is deemed to have killed somebody, but can we charge, criminally speaking, that robot for murder? Well, no, we're not there yet. So we're not going to charge a robot because a robot is not a person. So we go beyond the robot. So who created the robot? Who created the robot that malfunctioned and then committed a murder? Of course, it couldn't happen in the real world. It's just a science fictional example. But no, I don't think we are at the stage where robots can be basically sued or prosecuted in court.
Okay. Alexa?
Well, I'm just excited because I've never been called Mr. Hamilton so many times in my life, and no one ever calls me that. So, Seb, thank you. Yeah, no, you said nailed it. It's about personhood, right? And you know, if we can step outside science fiction for 1 second, we're nowhere close to personhood, and I think we're closer to having a serious debate about whether an animal can be charged with murder than a robot. So they're a long way ahead.
Okay. Vivek, sir.
And just to say, Mr. Hamilton again, I will say I agree with Mr. Hamilton.
See, the area with regard to the medical liability, the vicarious liability will come into picture. So, of course, if there is a manufacturing defect in any, because ultimately these are the manufactured machines. So the machine manufacturer would be liable along with the person who has used that machine. So in Indian law means means there have been so many other. Johnson and Johnson had manufactured that Dubai hip implant. So there was difficulty, and those doctors who operated, they were part of the litigation. They were equally liable vicariously liable for using those implants for Indian patients which had means no clearance by the Indian government. So this is very clear. Means that's not a means very very uh, uh, I don't want to say it's not a
Disputable
question.
question.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine enough. Abhivardhan, would you like to add anything?
To add into the question of legal persona, I think with regards to medical science and law, I think our panelists have really discussed that aspect. So I will not get into it. But with regards to legal persona, I'll just give a 2 minute or maybe 1 minute take
No problem. No
that
problem.
the interesting aspect with regards to the persona of artificial intelligence is whether it can be a legal persona or whether it can be a heuristic persona. Heuristic persona generally is decided by courts. Legal persona is generally decided by legislatures and executive branches of government. More likely, the recognition of AI in a heuristic sense can be apparent, but considering the Indian system and everything, we are still developing. Our laws are not that much advanced. I think that is also related to frugal innovation, but we don't understand how to have a better rule of law infrastructure so that with regards to IT, we are very much prepared with the disruption that technology can bring, whether it is anything, cryptocurrency, AI, or IoT, or anything. So in that aspect, we will not see a legal entity trend sooner in India, but at least for now, I think regarding drones, there are certain regulations which were introduced by the Indian government in 2018, I believe. But for the rest, I think it will be a category based or case to case based thing. So heuristic entity will be the most uncharted territory here. It's the most interesting one because here we are going to ask a simple question as to how AI is attributed to us. If there is a case of liability, then whether the anthropological definition, which we translate into legal interpretation, will, with regards to liability or accountability mechanisms, or the frameworks of law that we make, will they be similar to what is subjected to human beings? We have seen with animal rights, it doesn't work like that. We have seen in case of choice jurisprudence, like whether it is women or whether it is LGBT community or whether it is institutions of a particular faith. So, where when we interpret heuristic entity, it's a very different uncharted territory. So it's same will happen with AI. One thing is for sure that corporate liability or the issue of intermediary liability, we are not up to that right now. But yes, it will be a very central, I would say, figurine in determining how AI's legal persona is to be established in India. I think it will happen, but I would say it will be a case-to-case approach. So heuristic is something which is regarded as flexible approach, but still, I think some limited legal recognition is something which we can really have. So that would be my take. Thank you.
Okay. If the panelists allow, could I just address the questions from the participants? Yeah, okay. So this question is by Siddharth Badwa. He's written a question in two sets. His first part is, through libraries in Python or say in NLPE, we can create a legal library which will help to implement AI in law, isn't it?
Sebastian, I think you would be best answering this.
Well, just looking at the question again.
Is it visible to you?
Yeah, no, I don't see it. If I may please ask you to repeat the question.
Yeah, it is through libraries in Python or say in NLP. We can create a legal library which will help to implement AI in law, isn't it?
Well, I cannot answer this question.
These are few of the processes. Let me tell you, these are just processes. Tomorrow there would be another language. There will be another process. NLP is this is a language processing technology. So it is one and the same thing. So today it is there in place. Tomorrow there may be something. So it can be based on anything. And already maybe somebody has already developed something new. So we don't know. So there are various possibilities in this area.
And it's happening, right? We are seeing development.
Yeah.
So in the UK, for example, we had recently outsourced a library called Blackstone, which is used for parsing natural language processing and parsing of large legal text, which looks very impressive and is a great start. So you're starting to see these building blocks turn up. And yes, they're typically going to be done in Python. That's the go-to programming language for AI. Right now, at least the NLP, machine learning end of it. So yeah, it's happening, but you know, there hasn't been that much done on top, but rather beyond, for example, better search, where we've seen, you know, there's much better case search going on, and similarly, there's better classification of emails and so on in litigation and pulling out clauses in contracts. So these libraries exist. There are often the trained models are private, but you know, I expect them to become more common. Generally, all of the technology and law that's working in this space is built on top of open source, more generic technologies. So yeah, it's happening, but it's simple stuff.
Maybe I will add something here, not to go too much away from the question that was asked, but just to add one thing that was mentioned by well, shall I say it, Mr. Hamilton? But something very interesting about the case law research, and again, and that also connects it to what we said at the very beginning. So we can have very sophisticated tool to track down pictures of cats or decisions, et cetera, but again, at the end of the day, and I will say two things about this. First, I had the occasion to search or try to search case law and decisions from various courts. Some legal search engines are better done than others. It's easier in one country, for example, to find decisions than in the other country, et cetera. I don't want to say any country. I don't want to point the finger, but again, that's the first part of it. So it still needs and requires work in some places of the world. But again, at the end of the day, who puts in or who looks for the information? Human beings. So again, when I search all these decisions, if I have horrible keywords, if I don't know what I'm talking about, if I have no idea about what I look for, if I cannot narrow down to the topics I'm looking for, I will be lost. So again, wisdom, said by Mr. Vivek at the very beginning, and reason must be used, as said, I will say it again, by Mr. Hamilton earlier during this presentation. So again, human beings matters. These in terms of legal search engines, and this is how I go away a little bit from the question that was asked, but I think there's still a connection to it, is yes, the tools are useful, and also you can use the tool, and I do it. That's something I'm known for in my workplace, I have to admit. My very nerdy search skills, because basically I find I don't know, some call it some magic that I use, but it's not magic, it's wisdom, the ability to connect words and to search for decisions pinpointing to a very single thing. But again, this cannot be done by AI. So if we wouldn't have, let's say in the worst case example, to finish on this, in the worst case example, we do not have a very good legal search engine for doctrine and doctrinal papers or decisions. What do? Well, we still have brains. We can still, that's going to require more work because the engine is not very functional for XYZ reason. But again, with your own self, you can dig into what's available and find it and track it down. So to go back to the question more broadly, legal libraries, yes, it's great, but that will never replace yourself as the person who search for the information. So, and if you push it ahead to the next level, it basically helps you when you really are a magician of legal search engines, if I may call myself or other people this way. It helps you to think, because it makes the process of finding the information faster. But who is the person who digests the information? The human being, not the machine.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, right here. So I'll address another question. I would say this is something that is going to summarize our discussion. It is like, I have a question. What will be the core legal area which will be affected the most by AI?
Contracts. Drafting and vetting. Okay, drafting of contracts means not in litigation, it would
Not
be very
contracts.
effective.
Your area, not my area. It's happy it's litigation. We'll get rid of the litigators. We don't need them. But the contracts lawyers are safe. Don't worry.
No, already some countries, means some firms have started using it. Means I was reading Forbes news on this a couple of months back. So I found that three law firms are using it for generalizing their contracts. They put the inputs inside the document, and then AI helps them in formulating that contract. And then
That's
also
totally
analytics
true, but it's not
but
AI.
yes, certainly, I agree.
It's not AI. It's called document automation. So we use it for every contract we produce. We don't do any contracts by hand, but there's no AI involved. And in fact, it goes to Seb's point, because we have to sit down and figure out all the different permutations, what the questions are, what the logic is. We're trying to figure out ways to automate it, but every time we do it, just makes a mess. So the reality is you have to do it by hand to build these things to actually make it work really well in our
Suppose
area.
Hamilton is drafting a contract for to be executed in India. He will have to know the Indian conditions. AI will never be able to know the Indian conditions. He will have to physically verify various facts. The AI can never perceive those physical conditions and how the contract has to be drafted, because it is very material. What is the legal process that takes place in India? If suppose he's drafting anything pertaining to India or any other country for that matter, how the people behave there, what is the tenure of litigation if required to be, and how to protect that, how the arbitration or mediation or ADRs moving in that country. So there are various aspects to that thing. Means ultimately it has to be something. Means of course research and analytics. Suppose a company is having so many contracts and they want to verify, okay, with regard to the arbitration clause, what are the clauses in different agreements, or with regard to any liability or any action that is being taken against them, or some notice has been served. So how to respond to it by virtue of contract, and the contract of 1,000 pages. So AI maybe means some process may be created through AI to really analyze the contract. So that those analysis means it's like baby food that can be produced by the AI. Ultimately, you have to cook hardcore food. So it can only produce the soft results, not the real results in common parlance.
Okay. Please, Sebastian, sir, you have something to say?
Well, yeah, it was interesting. So basically, what I would add to this it really depends on where you are. If you are in some American states, in the United States of America, so some people would tell you definitely it's criminal law that's the most impacted by artificial intelligence, because of the use, non-extensive, but still use of what I mentioned earlier, the prediction tools for sentencing purposes when imposing a sentence on an accused. But if you take the same idea or legal machine and say, okay, what's the impact of it in Canada? Well, nothing. There's no, as far as I know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some location, cities in Canada where they use it, but I never heard of a judge, and I've been practicing in Toronto now, of course, but as you mentioned earlier, but I'm pretty much in touch with the entire country when it comes to this stuff in the criminal law field, and I never heard of it. So it really depends on where you are, what you want to do, and also something else that was pointed out twice this morning, and I think it's a very important message. What are we talking about? Like you were beautifully said. There's by Mr. Hamilton again. There's a lot of bullshit about artificial intelligence, right? So he said that earlier. That was it maybe say, whoa, what is he saying here? Well, that's right. Before we start talking about something, we must define it precisely. So when we talk about contract law, that's the second point here. So when we talk about contract law, well, automated document, it is not indeed artificial intelligence. It's different. It still requires a lot of human beings' involvement. So first of all, we got to be careful about the definition of what is artificial intelligence indeed, because there are several definitions. There's not even a consensus about this, right? So it's variable. There are common understandings, of course, but a definition to which people will rely on all the time and say, yeah, this is the definition. No, it doesn't exist. There's no consensus, as I said. So it depends. So the most impacted area of law, well, first, where you are, and second, what do you mean by, and of course, I'm not asking the question, I sit more rhetorically, but what do you mean by artificial intelligence? Because it can vary depending on where you are.
Oh, definitely. So somebody needs to put their... Okay, Abhivardhan, you have some take on this? Abhivardhan?
Well, yeah, I think it's audible. So I think I very much agree much with all the panelists. There's no disagreement. One thing which I can add is it can start with the operatives where the legal procedure is clear. Like, for example, maybe in like contracts is the easiest answer to give, that yes, a contract law can be a core area. However, within even contract law, it can be on an operative basis, but where? So, for example, it can be with regards to companies and consumers, companies and governments. Maybe there it can work. It's not exactly related to, like, for example, in smart contracts, for example. In fintech, yes, it can be a matter of establishment. In terms of lethal autonomous weapons, yes, it can be. I think for drones, we are already doing it. So perhaps this can be one more area. Can we say it will come on litigation? It's impossible. It's a simple statement. It's impossible. Criminal law, I don't think so. Accuracy issues are there. Beyond that, as I said, that every legal interpretation has an anthropological purpose always. This gap cannot be filled by AI. Humans are more capable, very well in this. In fact, that's the very difference between AI and humans in general. Whatever we say AI, or whatever kind of systems are affiliated in the kingdom of AI or the basket of AI. So maybe corporate law is one of them, but not that much significant, I think, to a limited extent. Fintech and law, yes, I think. Not core legal fields like constitutional law, international law, nothing is going to happen. I think there was one very interesting report on diplomacy. So maybe something related to diplomatic law and trade negotiations. I think United Nations tried to do it in 2018, something like Finland or some Scandinavian country tried to come up with an AI diplomacy method for bargaining with regards to the GATT. But that's very nascent steps. So I think maybe more related to economics and trade, maybe more related to compliance issues. But to say it will be democratizing so fastly at a ground level, I'm just taking the Indian context. I'm not taking the American or European context. I don't think so. It will be happening so faster in India. Yeah, but yes, maybe if we have the parameters ready and the system is trained in a way, then let us see, maybe in 5 to 10 years or sometime we will see a change. But currently I don't think so. It will not impact any core legal field that much. It will impact few legal fields in a very procedural manner, not at a substantive level. So that would be my take.
Yeah, I want to just add one more thing. Means in the effective auditing of the legal processes, court functioning, case management, AI can very, very effectively be used. Like there is a aircraft, how this air means, if you look at the plan, how on a one runway the planes have to get down and then go up. So there is an effective management through AI. So those tools can be created for the legal system also. If those tools are created in Indian legal system, I'm telling you within 10 years time, it would bring the effective litigation to at least 20, means reduce it to 20% to what it is today. So that effective management is required. It creates a benchmark in the minds of people. They bring target in the mind of people, those who are sitting at the helm as judges and litigators or the lawyers. So they know how the system is functioning. So we can improve the functioning of the system by way of applying AI. So that's where, means there is a lot of potential in Indian market.
Definitely, I'd like to thank all the panelists for their views upon this topic. At this juncture, I'd like to welcome Tushar, who is the owner of Alpha AI and Law Dictat, which is basically dealing with AI and law in India. Tushar, please, over to you.
Hi everyone. I'm not sure if I'm visible or audible. Could everyone
You
hear
are
me?
visible, sir. Yes, you are visible.
Sure. Cheers.
Yeah, hi Tushar.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. Thank you to all the panelists for coming aboard, and it was a really, really interactive and an honest. And I was actually, wasn't expecting, that kind of responsive and that kind of intuitive insights into how this really works. Because me being from the technical area, so for me it's more about how to uh, how to systems work cognitive intelligence. So that's what our core systems work around. And like one of the products that I'd just like to introduce to everyone over here is Law Dictat. So in Law Dictat, what we're trying to do is like all the processes that all of you have asked, that's the basis of this whole product that we've designed. So like initially in play contracts also, as Alex and as Sebastian initially mentioned, that it's not really AI. So yes, I'm totally in for it. That's not AI. It's more about segregation of data and how you're going to create data sets, or you're going to create some segregation models around it. So that is just the basis on how developing a further systems down the line. So our objective is to, our end goal with this current project is to develop an embodiment of AI that would eventually end up assisting all the advocates, such as Vivek sir over here, and all the judges as well at the courts. So they can actually support them with litigation. They can actually support them while doing some language understanding over all the contracts, all the criminal cases or whatever it is. So as you all suggested, that there's a lot of understanding and there's a lot of insights that are really needed prior to claiming that the AI can work in that area. So that's just the current research area that we are following on. So our current is behavior analytics, cognitive intelligence, and obviously deep learning. And we are, leveraging these three technologies and trying to, develop a consciousness that can actually help everybody in a particular field to, improve upon the productivity. And as per the Indian, the state of Indian legal system, improve the turnaround time for different, how cases are dealt with. So increasing the turnaround time. So that's our primary goal, and that's how we're going forward with that. That being said, yeah, thank you once again to all the panelists, and thanks to Kajari here for being such a decent moderator. And thank you everyone for coming in. At the same time, I believe there's one question here. So sorry for everybody. Sorry everyone, there's a question. Yeah, so I believe Siddharth was asking that question, right? So Siddharth, apparently it's not about the libraries, like not about AI library being built or what kind of things you're trying to leverage here. It's more about your understanding as to what you're trying to build inside that particular system. So as Sebastian and Alex were discussing that, uh, all the technologies are open source. So even we are leveraging everything that has been provided by Google and Facebook out there. So something called as GPT 1 and 2, GPT 3 just recently came out. So it's classified. We have a beta access to it. At the same time, we are also leveraging Bird, and there's something called as Jarvis from NVIDIA. We are leveraging as well. So there are a couple of state-of-art technologies that we're building on top, and that's one of the ways you could go forward in your area as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll just give it back to Kajari. Yeah, thank you all. Thanks for coming in, and thank you for your time.
Hello, I am back. So here, I think Sebastian sir had, he would like to answer a question on language learning and AI. So briefly, would like to address this question.
Yeah, for sure. Very briefly, because I don't want to interrupt too much, because the discussion is about the law and AI, not language learning and AI. But very briefly, what I can say is, personally, when you want to learn a language and using artificial intelligence, I ordered more than a year ago a pure artificial intelligence tool that is basically like Alexa, but to refine your learning of Chinese. I'm not going to say the name, still waiting for it anxiously. But when you learn a language, AI is a tool, but there are many other tools. You can create your own AI-like learning by using various methods. Flashcards, I use it for learning Chinese ideograms, or also learning simply alphabet while learning Hindi, for example, which I'm doing right now and started a few months ago. I use it. I use flashcards. I use various methods, putting stickers and post-its basically all over the place in my home. There are various methods. Audio exposure by list. Even though you don't understand everything at the beginning, expose yourself to listening, to speaking. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Talk to people, even though you make mistakes in a foreign language. You'll be liked, and people will appreciate it. So if I say dhanyavad or thank you in the horrible Hindi right now, you hear that my accent is absolutely unacceptable, but I'm sure you appreciate that I can say dhanyavad even though it's horrible. But the point is, don't be afraid to break the ice, open yourself, to speak, to listen, and to memorize. AI will not fix your brain. Learning is difficult. Learning a grammar is difficult. The mechanics of a language, the grammar has to be known by human beings. Machines will never be able to replace you unless you have a speaker in your body that will speak for yourself with your own voice, and we're far from it at this stage. There are some devices that exist that does automatic translation, but you're not the person basically who speaks. You're replaced somehow to a certain extent by a small device, and I don't even know if it works. I've seen it, never used it. But for your own self, there are various methods. Repetition is key. Working every day on language learning, at least 15 minutes, that's the key. So that would be my short answer.
Well, Sebastian, Dhanyavad is not ugly at all. Means you're saying so means it was beautiful, because learning is very beautiful. The more we learn, means ultimately human caliber is too. Means if you look at that one movie in which the female character reaches to utilization of mind at 100%, and then means I think it was Julie or something, some movie. So it's like utilization, and it is only, you can utilize the brain only by way of learning. So if you are learning things, means it is always very beautiful, not ugly at all. Whatever it be, means I consider it that way. So it's beautiful.
I would say this is something very nicely said. Learning is beautiful. So is the human mind. So is the human reason, and so is the human wisdom. With all these kind words and all the output and intake that we take from today's session, I must say we ended up having a very, very nice, fruitful discussion for over 1 hour upon a topic which is somewhat touching us, but not exactly touching us. And hopefully we'll get back soon with some more topics of deliberation. I thank all our panelists for taking out time from their busy schedule for us. Thank you so much. We are really, really honored to have you aboard. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank
and Sebastian, sir, your dhanyavad was actually very cute.
Oh. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. चलो करें छोड़े